Today, we're going to tackle a big one, a theological concept that can be pretty challenging, but is absolutely crucial. Total depravity. We're going to break it down using a really powerful sermon, not as just some abstract theory, but as a diagnosis of the human condition.
So let's just dive right in with a story from our source. Picture this. A man runs inside totally panicked and tells his wife there's water in the car's carburetor. Now, she's immediately skeptical, right? Because he knows absolutely nothing about cars. Finally, after a little prodding, he admits the real problem. The car is in the swimming pool. You see, he was focusing on a tiny symptom of a complete and total catastrophe. And that story, it's the perfect setup. The sermon uses this idea to frame total depravity not as some dry, dusty doctrine, but as a diagnosis. The argument is that we often do the same thing. We point to these small problems in our lives, the water in the carburetor, when our entire situation might be way, way more compromised. So, according to this view, the real issue isn't just about a series of bad choices or mistakes we make. No, it goes deeper. It's a fundamental problem with our inherent nature itself, a condition that we're actually born into. So, what exactly is total depravity? Well, here's the formal definition. The doctrine states that sin has affected and corrupted every single part of who we are as human beings. It's not just our behavior, you see. It's our thinking, our will, our desires, our emotions. The whole system has been compromised. Now, this is absolutely crucial, and it's where a lot of people get tripped up. The source makes this crystal clear. The word total does not mean that a person is as evil as they could possibly be. That's a huge misunderstanding. Instead, it refers to the extent of sin's influence. It means that sin has touched and affected every single part of us. And here's an analogy from the sermon that just illustrates the point perfectly. Think about a single drop of poison in a glass of water. That one drop contaminates the entire glass. You don't need a cup full of poison for the whole thing to be undrinkable, right? The idea is that the corruption, even if it's not at maximum intensity, affects the whole. Okay, so now that we have a solid definition, the source material does something really interesting. It directly confronts a few common beliefs that really push back against this doctrine. It kind of puts these ideas on trial. First up, you've got this very popular idea that, deep down, people are basically good. But the sermon contrasts this directly with the biblical view from Ephesians, which describes humanity not as just sick or struggling, but as spiritually dead. And think about it. A dead person can't help themselves. They can't do anything. Next, it takes on the idea that there's some kind of untouched spark of divinity inside all of us. The sermon's response is pretty blunt. What good is a single unlit candle in the attic if the entire house is burning to the ground? It's arguing that this supposed spark is nowhere near enough to save a nature that's already completely compromised. And to bring this all back to reality, the sermon pulls out this fantastic quote from G.K. Chesterton. The point here is that the evidence for a broken human nature isn't just some abstract theological idea. You just have to look around. It's observable in the daily news, in the conflicts and tragedies we see every single day. So where does this diagnosis actually come from? Well, the source builds its entire case by pointing to specific scriptural evidence. And the argument isn't just built on one or two verses that are cherry-picked. It's a cumulative case, drawing from passages all across the Bible. You have humanity described as dead in sin, as fundamentally unrighteous, as sinful from the moment of birth, and having a desperately sick heart. All of these are interpreted to paint a picture of a universal human condition, one of spiritual brokenness. So, when you put all of that together, the sermon builds to this one crucial point. Total depravity ultimately means total inability. And what that means is, left to our own devices, humans are completely unable to choose God, to please God, or to save themselves. Okay, so that's the diagnosis. But that brings us to the most important part of this entire discussion, right? The prescription. Why does any of this matter? And that's a fair question. The one on your screen is key. Why should we even care about a doctrine that, let's be honest, sounds pretty bleak? Well, the source argues it's absolutely crucial, because the kind of diagnosis you accept determines the kind of cure you look for. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. If you think you're just a little sick or maybe struggling a bit, all you need is a helper, a coach, a therapist. But if you're dead, as this doctrine asserts, you need something infinitely more powerful. You don't need a helper, you need a savior, someone who can literally bring you back to life. The source really hammers this point home.
arguing that our understanding of the problem directly affects how much we appreciate the solution. If sin is just a tiny mistake, then Jesus is just a good moral teacher. But if sin is a profound, catastrophic rebellion, what the source calls cosmic treason, then the solution has to be just as massive, just as monumental.
So the ultimate takeaway here isn't despair. It's not about self-loathing. According to this sermon, the whole purpose of the doctrine is to completely shatter our self-reliance. It's meant to bring a person to a point of desperation where they finally stop trying to fix themselves and instead surrender completely to an outside rescuer. And we'll leave you with that final thought, a question that really gets to the very heart of the matter. Does the diagnosis of a problem change the value of its cure? Because how we define our own condition inevitably shapes how we see the solution. And that's the central point of this doctrine, as laid out in our source material.